In the previous video, we went over the story plot points in Act 2. The first half of Act 2, we have the characters face challenges. They try to pursue what they want to do or to face a problem, and they see no progress. They go through transformation in the second half, and then they have another challenge, and in that challenge they have a realization which leads to Act 3. The overall intention of the character in Act 3 is that of renewal. They're no longer seeking the answer for how to be victorious because they know now the answer of how to be victorious. Now they just have to go and do it so they can go get it done with and move on. So their intention of renewal is, in other words, an intention to just move on. I'm done with this. I just want to face a problem and be done. I just want to do what I want to do, get what I want, and move on to better things. It is said that Act 3 is when the climax of the story happens, the crisis. This is when the character faces the problem for the final time and almost loses because they underestimate it, but they approach it in the new way that they have realised it must be approached in. The first half of Act 3 is the final problem, approaching, growing. They will face a problem and they will overcome it. They will overcome the problem, or they will get what they want, and then in the second half of Act 3 is an excellent way to end any story by revisiting the old and introducing the new. So, Act 3, the first half, focuses on rebirth. In the first half of Act 3, we have the character reborn, in a sense. They have new skills, new knowledge. More importantly, they have a new way of looking at things and a new sense of possibility. In Act 2, they have gone through transformation, and now there is rebirth. And when there is internal rebirth of the character, that leads to an external rebirth of the situation that they're in, their life problems that were around them. Everything changes because they change inside. So, step 1, preparation for the final challenge. After the end of Act 2, where they've had the realization of what to do, the first step of Act 3, the first half of Act 3, is for the character to actively seek out the final challenge so they can just finish it. They're going to head towards the final confrontation. So first, think of what it is the character must do to finally overcome the problem, or what they must do to get what they want, or what they need. Now, in this first step, show the character preparing, seeking it out. If they have to defeat a bad guy who resides at the top of a tower, for example, show your character kitting up and making their way up the stairs to the top of the tower, past guards, fighting guards, past traps, so they can make it to the top and defeat the bad guy. To summarise, whatever it is they have to do, essentially show them preparing for it and going to do it. Or show the challenge coming to them. And while it does, they will brace themselves and prepare for the time when the challenge arrives. So the story continues from Act 1 and Act 2. Story example, a simple story demonstrates the methods in the simplest way. Thank you for the food, the frog says, who is guarding the river. My belly is full, and so the frog allows the squirrel to pass and cross the river. That was Act 2. Now he follows the tracks very closely of the figure who has been stealing his food, his nuts. The squirrel must get them back or he will starve in the winter. He keeps moving forward and doesn't look at anything else. He doesn't pay any attention to the hideous forest monsters that lurk in the shadows. And he fights any off that get in his way. He doesn't stop for anything, he just looks forward until he gets there and reaches the one who's been stealing his food. He will approach and confront the thief when he gets there, and he will take all of his food back. Step 2, the climax. Face the final challenge. This one is simple. They face the final challenge. They deal with the problem head on, or they will do what they need to do in the final challenge to get what they want. And it's a close call. They give it all they have, and the problem puts up one heck of a fight. Or they give it all they have, but what they must do is incredibly difficult. The final challenge, or another name for this stage, can be the final battle. This is the moment where they either win or lose, and they get no second chances. In this step, show how that battle is and how difficult that battle really is, because it's going to be tough. And I'll do a separate video on the battle. During this challenge, they almost fail. They have an apparent defeat. All hope seems lost. There can be many apparent defeats in a story, but this is the main one. I explain in depth about how to write an apparent defeat in my latest series, which is going to be linked below. Think of how the character will appear to have lost everything. They will have lost all hope without recovery. I also give step-by-step instructions and ideas to write an apparent defeat in the series. Is your story exciting? So it's worth checking out. So, the story example: the squirrel exits the foresty abyss and enters a vast grassland. Grass and shrubs as far as you can see, but no trees. He scurries over to the figure who has been stealing the nuts, next to several other figures. They are chipmunks, and wow, that is a big pile of nuts stacked away that they have stolen. Those are my nuts. You have stolen them from me, and now I will starve in winter. You must give me my food back. The chipmunk says, "No. I did not know I was stealing from you. I'm sorry. I couldn't believe my luck when I found such a pristine heaven with so many nuts lying around. You see here, there are no trees, no food, and my family will starve this winter if I had not taken the nuts from your park. And I will not let you take them back. Leave now, or I will feed you to the frog. He will enjoy crunching on your bones for lunch." Step 3. Overcome the problem or gain the desire. So in other words, they win. During this apparent defeat, they pick themselves up, they remember what they learned in the second half of Act 2, Step 3, after their transformation and during their realization. They give it everything they have and they win. And it's because they remember what they learned during the realization in Act 2. Or they could have the realization now, but stick to the structure if you want to just make it easier. So think of how your character can pick themselves up and win. Either they pick themselves up and win, or someone else helps to pick them up. Someone else helps them win with them. But they continue the final battle, the final challenge, and they win. What happens next after the challenge? What happens after the climax? We're only halfway through Act 3. The character's intention in Act 3 was renewal, to just move on. Well, they've got what they want, or they've dealt with a problem. Now it's time for that renewal. In the second half of Act 3, the character rounds everything up and prepares to start fresh. So, as the story example, the chipmunks will not return the food to the squirrel. They threaten the squirrel to leave, and there's nothing the squirrel can do because he's outnumbered. What choice does the squirrel have but to turn back? The squirrel remembered what the owl told him and what he realized. Kindness is the better way. He gave the frog food and the frog helped him. What about now? So he made an offer. Right before he almost loses, "Come live in my park and we can share the food together. And that way neither of us will starve." The chipmunks said, "You have yourself a deal." So the first half of Act 3, they have prepared for their final confrontation, and now they are on their way to confront it. They have the final confrontation, which is the climax. They almost lose, and then they remember how to be successful. And then they are successful. So now, the second half of Act 3, the story is ending. And this focuses on the renewal. In Act 1, at the end of Act 1, they came to the realization that if they just pursue what they want or face the problem, then everything will go back to normal. Everything will be fine. But now they realize things cannot go back to normal. Things have changed. Something new, and hopefully better, has taken its place. A new life, a new situation, a new relationship, a new friendship, a new job, a new way of living, for example. But before there can be renewal, we must say goodbye to the old. And that means we must return back to normality. That is step 1. Return to normality. The character must return back to their normal life. Whether it's different or a little bit the same, they must bring balance back, put things back in place. But they have one more thing to do in order to get back to normality. Sometimes this involves an actual journey that they have to make. And no, this part isn't just the character just walking back while we watch. There is purpose to this stage. There is a purpose of the character having one more thing to do, one more challenge to overcome, to return to normality. After the challenges they face, the emotional ups and downs, the climax of the story, their normal way of life is completely out of sight, how things were. It is a task in itself to now return back to normality. Whatever that normality now looks like. Whatever that balance now is. Either that there's a physical journey back, or if it's not a physical journey, it might just be the readjusting of things, putting things back in place, or putting new things in place, returning order and balance of things that had lost its structure with no routine. Now that routine returns. Now that structure returns. And they must do that. They must put that routine and structure and normality back in place. They may be presented, or they have to go back to that normality. They may be presented with challenges or barriers that they have to overcome to get back to normality, or they just have to travel back maybe. If there is another challenge, they face it and overcome it. They do manage to put things back in order, and they do manage to bring balance back to their life. The challenges, they're like a barrier. They have to overcome these challenges, these physical challenges or things they have to do to get back to normality. We might even see how these aren't challenges anymore because we've already overcome them. And what would have been a challenge just isn't anymore. So where they'd expect the same challenges on the way back, they might not be challenges anymore. Or if they are, they might be able to deal with them much better. To sum it up, this return to normality comes with a barrier that they must cross in order to get back to normality. Think of something difficult that they must do or something they must overcome in order to get back to normality, to actually create normality. And then they do it with much more ease. Even though it's a challenge, they can do it. Or you can think of where they'd expect to be a barrier, where they'd expect a challenge to be, and they prepare and brace for it, but there isn't one, because they've already overcome it, and it's not a challenge anymore. So, the story example can go like this. The squirrel and the chipmunks had to make the journey back, the physical journey back. It's getting colder as winter is now on the horizon. They must go back through the foresty abyss and carry everything with them because the chipmunks are moving. We see that what would have been a challenge just isn't anymore. He knows the way back. And he doesn't get lost. Suddenly the foresty abyss isn't so scary. He helped the frog earlier, and now the frog just lets him cross the river. There is no challenge because he overcame it earlier. But now there's a new challenge, a new barrier. It's cold. It's freezing. They have to move everything back. And they have to move everything. The chipmunks are moving, so they have to carrying all the nuts. They have to carry all the nuts. It's freezing. They huddle together to keep warm. Very, very cold. And finally they return back to the park. His tree, warmth, normality, peace. It's a welcome sight. But the story isn't quite over. Step 2. Now they tie up the loose ends. On their journey back to normality, or after they've returned to normality, they may have some loose ends to tie up. What does that mean exactly? What is a loose end? Any promises they made, they now go and keep them. Any conflict they had with others earlier on in the story, they go and resolve that conflict. Anyone who helped them, they say thank you. Anyone who helped them, they repay them. Or maybe they help them with something in return. So, story example could be that the chipmunks move in. They move in, all the nuts are returned, and it's easier to share rather than to fight with who gets what. There are a few creatures that the squirrel must say thank you to before we can settle down. He must repay them. The owl returns. I see you've made it home. Well done for being determined. You have your reward, and now the story is over. The squirrel says, I must say thank you. I would not have succeeded if it wasn't for your help. But I have one more thing to do. I made a promise that I must keep. The squirrel packs a hefty bag of nuts and walks to the edge of the park. Where are you going? Where are you taking those nuts? Said the owl. I have a promise to keep. I shall return at dusk. Don't worry, there's plenty food for everyone. The squirrel leaves the park and enters the foresty abyss once more. It isn't as scary this time, but it's cold, frozen. He approaches the river. A giant green beast emerges from the frozen lake. Its beady eyes roll towards the squirrel. It opens its enormous jaw and it screams, "Ribbit." The frog says, you have returned to be faithful to your promise. The squirrel emptied a large bag of nuts and he says, these are yours. Fill your belly as I promised. Thank you for your kindness in letting me pass earlier. This is your reward. And the squirrel left. Step 3. Introduce a new normal. We've said goodbye to the old, now introduce the new. So think about what's new in your character's life. What's new now? That's the important bit. What's to come? If you're ending your story now, or even if you're writing a sequel, if your story ends right now, the story will continue. So now is a good time to introduce something else that they might want, or a new rising problem that could, for example, could be part of the next story you're writing, to be a sequel or a spin-off, or just to leave it to the audience's imagination. An old problem goes, that makes space for a new problem to rise up, and something that they would have to deal with. It's only natural that this happens. But the question is now, are they prepared for it? Do they expect it? Will they deal with it? Will they have to go through another journey of transformation? This is great, even if you're not planning to write a sequel, because it shows that even though you've stopped writing the story, their story does continue. It will continue. It's a very satisfying ending. This new norm brings change of intention again, which we're going to introduce, and that would lead on to another story. What they're going to do now, what they plan to do, what their purpose is now. Very simply, what's next? Do they relax? What do they intend to do? Do they enjoy? Do they go after something else? Do they deal with another problem on the rise, or another problem from the past? Do they go and teach others? Do they become a mentor for others? This again shows their story isn't over. Just because you stop telling the story, it still continues. Just leave a little hint as to what's next for them and what they intend to do from here, because of what the characters achieved, and now because of how things are. Think about what are the challenges or responsibilities this could now bring onto your character because of what the story that they've gone through and what it's like now. What happens next? What problems will new problems? Ask questions that speculate what your character might now have to deal with in the future. Will it be easy forever? Or are there any new challenges on the horizon? So, in our story, the chipmunks have moved in. They've moved into the tree in the park with the squirrel, and they're quite at home. And the owl occasionally visits. They have plenty of nuts, plenty of food for all of them to make it through winter. Winter has arrived, but by this time, word has spread about the park. Animals from far and wide travel to this park through the forested abyss just to reach this land of abundant food. Every day someone new turns up. It's welcome, there should of course be enough food. For now. But how many more will turn up? How many more can they feed? Let's do a summary of all the plot points in Act 3. The second half of Act 3 is when the renewal happens. They return to normality. The character returns back to normal life. They do what they need to do to bring back balance. They cross the barrier to return to normal life. They put things in place. They make a journey home maybe. They tie up loose ends. They thank who they need to thank. They keep promises with who they need to keep promises with. They resolve conflict with who they had conflict with. Introduce the new. Renewal. What's next? Rising problems that they have to deal with? Why don't you go through your favourite films or books and pick out the plot points that are in the 3-act structure. As you watch or read, just think to yourself, oh, that's step 1, or that's step 2, step 3, or now we're on act 2. You know, now they've got a different intention. It's just the hero's journey fitted into the 3-act structure. And I will be doing future videos where I break down movies, TV shows. I will break down the structure, the story structure, the writing, plot points, and I'll show you which point is which, you know, which is the change in the act, where they change their intention, which plot point is when. If you found this series helpful, please leave a like and let me know in the comments that you found it helpful. It lets me know that my work is helpful, and it does keep me motivated for more. I love getting comments from all of you and questions. I'm Joe Webb, a storyteller. Learn to write fiction properly.